One of the byproducts of dysfunction in our political system is obviously a certain amount of discontent and rage. Rage is kind of strong, but I think there's rage that builds up in the electorate. People don't know where to go. They don't know how to solve the problem. As we've tried to do on None of the Above, we're focusing on the causes of dysfunction and then talking about different ways to deal with it, find solutions. And some of the stuff we've talked about mostly to date is how to get involved in the system and how to work within the system, how to express your voice and how to be heard. One of the more extreme elements and one of the more extreme ways this is playing out in particular has been through recall elections, where elements of the electorate are saying enough is enough, we know this person was elected, we can't wait for that person's term to be up. We have to do something now. They're not representing their district, they're not representing the voters. It's time for a change. And one of the ways this is playing out again is through recall elections. We have with us today Joel Williams, who's with Ballotpedia, and he's been making a study of recall elections and special elections. So we're going to visit with Joel and talk about how this is playing out, this increasing phenomenon we're seeing, maybe some predictions of where it's going, and just understand the process, because again, one of the things we're about in this program is process. So Joel, welcome to None of the Above. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Maybe the best way to start this segment is to actually educate our viewers on what is a recall election and what is a special election.
Okay, well, special elections are essentially an election held not during normally scheduled times to fill a vacancy, to fulfill the remainder of that seat's term. So essentially, if somebody leaves office, you don't want to wait the maybe 3 years to get a replacement in, so you have a special election.
So it could come through someone leaving office, resigning or whatever, but could that also be a byproduct of having a recall election and then a special election follows?
Recall elections, typically what you'll have is one election, and voters will have two options on the ballot. They can vote to recall the official, and then as the second question on the ballot, they have an option of who to replace the recalled official.
Oh, so it's like two votes within one.
Right.
Now, we just had a recall election in Colorado. I know it got a lot of attention. There were some very heated issues, gun control surrounding it. What can you tell us about that recall and your perspective on how that played out?
From what I saw, one of the major issues in it was, well, gun control is obviously a big deal, but the manner in which it was passed as emergency legislation was particularly concerning for voters, because that essentially meant that voters couldn't have a referendum to repeal the laws. So that was kind of, I guess, the main sticking point, and in particular why John Morse was targeted.
So in this case, how does a recall election start? How does it come about? Does it start with a petition? Is there a set of very strict legislative process that you have to follow? Can you walk us through that?
Right. So all the states that allow for recalls all have different particular laws. You know, some say that you need one of, 2 or 3 reasons to recall. Others are just you have to write up a recall petition and circulate it. All of them require different numbers of signatures. Some states do it based on how many votes that person received the last election, and other states do it by how many total people voted for the governor of that state. So it's best to kind of check with your Secretary of State if you're interested in doing a recall petition on specifically what the language should be and how many signatures you're going to need.
One of the things we've talked about on our show quite a bit is the fact that voter turnout, registration and turnout is so low. So I'm guessing, based upon what you said, if you have an off-cycle election where maybe a state rep got elected, he or she may have gotten elected with, 5, 6, 8,000 votes?
Right.
So the recall could be based on just a handful of that number?
Right, and that was one of the issues in Colorado, actually, is because the Libertarian Party filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of State's office to try and get on the ballot. It pushed the deadline for registration so far back that they couldn't do mail-in ballots, and something like 96% of people in Colorado in the 2012 election voted by mail-in ballot. So that kind of raises the question of, was it really the full demographic voting, or was it just the people interested, or what?
So what was the ultimate turnout in the recall in Colorado, and maybe you could give us some idea of what the turnout's been in the recall in some other elections?
Let's see. I can find the. I don't have the particular numbers offhand, but I know the recall numbers were extremely low.
And I find it interesting because I would have thought, whereas voters don't turn out generally for elections, that a recall would be such a heated issue that you would have a much higher turnout.
Right. I think the issue mostly is that you have the supporters of the recall who are super energized and out there to vote, but maybe not so much the people who are happy with the current incumbent. So it's more of a vocal minority than necessarily that's going to get out and vote.
And if that's the case, in recall elections, is there generally turning out of the incumbent? Do they generally lose for that reason?
I mean, I guess it depends. In terms of ones that make the ballot, I would say it's fairly 50-50. So we've had 21 recalls that actually went to election and 13 were successful. So I guess it's kind of hit or miss as to, so there's not really a hard and fast rule.
When you say 21 that went to recall, is there some interim step that determines whether or not you actually get to the recall level?
Right. So there's all sorts of different petition requirements that must be met. So you need your reason to be verified as constitutional, and you need to hit the magic number of signatures. And signatures can be tricky because typically a lot of them just get thrown out for a myriad of reasons. And so a lot of places don't even bother turning in signatures unless they have, double the requirement or something like that. So they can be sure that they're going to get the recall through.
And so you're seeing a rise of these recalls, or is it a level number? Where's this going?
I would say it's definitely gone up since 2011. We had from 1913 to 2008, there were only 21 recalls that we know of. And since then, we've had 52 more recalls. So I think it's definitely gone up in the last couple of years.
Are recalls normally happening in districts where the preceding election had been a particularly heated or close election, or is there no connection on that end?
I wouldn't really say there's a connection there. I know it's mostly in a few key states like Wisconsin, where they seem to have a very divided legislature, and Colorado over this gun control issue.
So it's actually becoming more issue based.
Right, yeah, I think so.
We're not talking about someone who committed some type of felony or something, and because it's really the equivalent of an impeachment almost, right? So it's not as though there was some heinous crime committed. The people that voted in the preceding election are now upset because they're not being represented.
Right.
Interesting. So how about on the special election front? Where's that headed these days?
Special elections, we had almost double in 2013 what we had in 2012. But they're just for such a different myriad of issues that, it's hard to see, this is a specific reason why it's trending up.
Well, for people that are cynical, and I'll wear my cynical hat for this one, is it possible that people ran in 2012 more as a favor for the party or to get elected? They didn't really want to serve their district anymore, and then they dropped out to open the seat for their party again?
That's kind of hard to say. I'm not really.
You're not going to give me that one, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know that the biggest reason why we had special elections were due to either political appointments, campaigns, or elections for other offices, though. So that was kind of the main reason that people left their office.
So someone left to run for another office.
Right.
Well, in those cases, though, you'd probably have to be going from either like municipal to state or state to municipal when the election cycles are different, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So the recall elections are going to be more issue-based. the special elections you're finding them maybe more vacancy based.
Correct.
Okay. Any particular takeaways for the viewers on what they would want to understand about this process that you want to drill down a little here? Or
I guess in special elections, I would say they're less competitive than regular elections in that roughly a third of the 2013 elections only had candidates from one major party. So that's kind of an interesting takeaway there.
and I think that's a function of redistricting. Again, someone may have left their seat and they're moving on to greener pastures, different pastures, whatever, and because of the way the redistricting was accomplished, the gerrymandering, whatever, they're probably going to be succeeded by someone from the same party.
Right.
Yeah, got that. So if people are interested in working with Ballotpedia, getting on your site, finding out more about information on these recalls and special elections, what would you have them do?
If you just go to the Ballotpedia homepage, there's a button for state legislatures on the right-hand side of our map. And if you click that, that'll take you to our state legislatures portal, and there's links for special elections, the 2014 general elections that are coming up in November, and recall elections.
And I assume that if there is a recall election or a special election, and people are in that district and they're a voter, they can go to Ballotpedia and get detailed information on that particular contest.
Right. We have, for recalls, we do information about, the history of the recall, what's causing it, who's the supporters for the recall, who's opposed to it, and for special elections, we try to have candidate profiles for everybody that's running.
I wouldn't expect anything less. Thanks so much, Joel. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.